Alex Pereira is the man. Out of all the active fighters who are currently fighting in mixed martial arts, Alex Pereira is my favorite fighter. I love this guy. No diddy. There's so many reasons why I love this guy, and in this video, I'm going to tell you the reasons why I love him. No diddy, again. One of the main reasons why I'm such a big fan of this guy is because of what he's been able to accomplish in such a short period of time. He's won 2 titles within 3 years. He hasn't even been in the UFC 3 years. He made his UFC debut back at UFC 268. That was in November of 2021. So he hasn't even been around 3 years. But he's already won 2 titles in 2 different weight classes and has defeated 5 former UFC champions and has finished 4 of those 5. So that's the main reason why I'm such a fan of this guy. And of course, I was a fan of him prior to him joining the UFC. I was a fan of him when he was fighting in Glory, where he also was a 2-division champion. Like in the UFC, he was a champion at middleweight and a champion at light heavyweight in Glory kickboxing. And he put on all those great, exciting fights and gave us so many great knockouts. The knockout of Jason Wilness, the knockout of Yusri Balgari, the knockout of Donaghy Abena. I could just go on and on and on about all the great moments he had in Glory. But I was a fan of him before he ever joined the UFC. I was a fan of him before he was fighting in LFA, before it was even announced that he was coming to the UFC. I had already been watching this guy and was already a fan of him. So my previous fandom of this guy plays a factor in why I'm such a big fan now, because I love kickboxing just as much as everyone else who's a fan of kickboxing, but mixed martial arts is really my favorite sport. So now a guy who I was a fan of in this other sport, he's come over to this sport, so I'm a fan of him because of that. And then, of course, because he's done such a great job in such a short period of time. And another reason why I'm a real big fan of this guy is because he's making us rethink everything we thought we knew about this sport. He's come in a short period of time and he's won 2 belts in 2 different weight classes, and he's beaten all these great guys who are former champions, and he's got these clear and obvious deficiencies in wrestling and in jiu-jitsu, but the guy's still winning. And everyone is going crazy. Everyone is trying to figure out how he's able to do this. I get a real kick out of seeing people lose their minds over how this guy continues to win. Guys like Anthony Smith, guys like Daniel Cormier, and there's others, but those are just 2 names that you'd recognize that I hear talk about this guy all the time. I get a kick out of those guys trying to figure out how this guy continues to win. Now, of course, he has lost a fight. He lost the rematch, which was technically the 4th fight because he had fought Israel Adesanya 2 times before, but that was in kickboxing. He lost the rematch. He beat Israel Adesanya the first time, and then the second time in Miami, he lost that fight. So he has lost a fight, but it wasn't by the clear and obvious method. He got caught and he was knocked out. So I find that very interesting. And also, another thing that he's doing and his success is proving to us is that we haven't evolved that much. You look at the sport in 1993, and then you look at the sport in 2003, and it's a night and day difference. Then you look at the sport in 2003, and then you look at the sport in 2013, and it's a night and day difference. Then you look at the sport in 2013, and you compare it to 2023, and of course now we're in 2024, but stick with me. You look at the sport now, and it's basically the same sport that it was in 2013. It's now in 2024. We know that this is true because a guy like Alex Pereira wouldn't be able to exist if the sport had evolved so much from 2013 till now. A guy like him wouldn't be able to win. A guy like him wouldn't be able to be champion. A guy like him wouldn't be able to have taken out 5 former UFC champions. And this guy's also proving that old theory of Rory McDonald or guys like him are going to be the future of this sport. The future of this sport is guys who know everything and are good at everything and have trained everything their entire lives. It's not going to be the specialty fighter. It's not going to be the guy who's a world-class kickboxer. It's not going to be the guy who's an Olympic wrestler. It's not going to be the guy who's this Brazilian jiu-jitsu champion who just picks up the other stuff. It's going to be guys who from a young age have learned everything all at the same time, grew up doing all the stuff, and then they're good at everything, they know everything, and that's going to be the fighters of the future. It's going to be those complete fighters who are good at everything. Rory McDonald was supposed to be the prototype. Rory McDonald, a guy like him, was supposed to be who's the champion now at all these different weight classes. There's interviews with Dana White and all these people from 10 or 12 years ago who were talking about, well, you know, in 10 years, which would be now, in 10 years, the guys who are going to be the best guys in this sport are the guys who know everything and are good at everything. And here we have a guy who has beaten 5 former UFC champions and won 2 belts in 2 different weight classes, who has clear and obvious deficiencies in both wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yes, he's a world-class kickboxer, but based off of that old belief, a guy like him shouldn't even be here. He's not the prototype. Rory McDonald is the prototype, which is ironic because Rory McDonald, yes, he was a champion in Bellator, but he has no UFC titles to his name. He did fight for the UFC title, but he wasn't champion. You have a guy who's not the prototype. Here he is winning 2 titles in 2 different weight classes and beating all these former champions in a short period of time. He's only been in the UFC about 2.5 years. So that's another reason why I love this guy, is because he's breaking the mold. The prototype is Rory McDonald, but that guy, you know, I don't mean to pick on Rory McDonald here. This isn't a make fun of Rory McDonald session, but that guy who we were told was supposed to be the champion and supposed to be the norm in this sport was never champion, and this guy who is supposed to be extinct is the champion currently in 2024. So that's another reason why I really love this guy, is because he's making people rethink everything we thought about this sport. He's making people go crazy trying to figure out how he's able to do it, and he's not the fighter who we were told was going to be champion in 2024. So that's another reason why I like this guy, because he's forcing us to ask these questions, and he's forcing us to come face to face with the fact that we haven't evolved that much. And he's also forcing us to come face to face and accept that the winner of the fight, regardless if it's 1993 or 2023 or whatever, the winner of all these fights is always going to be the guy who is in better shape, tougher, and executes the game plan. That's always going to be the guy who wins the fight. We can talk about mixed martial arts, and we can talk about technique and all this stuff. This is an ass-whooping contest in a steel cage with small gloves. That's what the game is. We're overthinking everything, clearly, because a guy like this wouldn't exist. We're overthinking everything. It comes down to what it's always come down to, which is conditioning, toughness, and execution. So far, nobody's been able to execute the game plan that Daniel Cormier and Anthony Smith say is the clear and obvious way to beat this guy. No one's been able to do it. No one's been able to follow the game plan and get this guy onto the ground and submit him. So I find that very interesting, that here's a guy who's making us rethink everything. Another thing that makes me a fan of this guy is because, okay, so he's making us rethink what we thought about fighting, the stuff that goes on inside the cage. But he's also making us rethink what we thought a fighter would be in 2024 outside the cage. Because this guy, what we've been told about him is that he has no personality. We were told the guy of the future, the man of the future is Conor McGregor. Guys who talk and act like he does, those are the guys who are going to be stars. Now, I can argue behind Conor McGregor, there's only a handful of guys who are stars in the UFC, and Alex Pereira is one of those guys. We were told that a guy like him was extinct. A guy who wasn't this big trash talker, this guy who wasn't out there pounding his chest, telling everybody he's the greatest. We were told guys like Randy Couture and Rich Franklin and all these guys who were big stars back in the day, we were told all those guys are extinct. And the guys who are in now are the Conor McGregors and the Sean O'Malley's of the world. Those are the guys, the Sean Stricklands. Those guys are the guys who are in style. Guys like Alex Pereira, we have no need for them. those guys can't be stars because they don't talk trash and do all the other ridiculous stuff. Well, that turned out to be false also. So this guy's making us rethink, what does it take to be a star? This guy's doing what we always knew had to be done to become a star. Authenticity. For some reason, authenticity got thrown out the window. Even though everyone craves it, even though everyone wants it, for some reason, authenticity was put on the back burner, and everyone's coming up with all these fake personas. Everyone's coming up and playing a character. Alex Pereira doesn't play a character. He is a character. We have try-hard wannabe losers like Henry Cejudo and Colby Covington who are giving us nothing of value. These guys are talking all this nonsense and doing all this nonsense and are getting nowhere. And then you have a guy, Alex Pereira, who just shows up and just goes about his business, and people are drawn to that. He's the most unintentionally funny person out there. We're always told that he has no personality, yet for some reason, and again, I follow nobody on social media. I don't follow anybody on Instagram, but I always check in and see what Alex Pereira is up to because the guy makes me laugh all the time in the most ridiculous ways. He's riding a roller coaster, and they do that thing where they take the picture of the people when they come down, and he's stone-faced, hands of stone, Poeton. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised that he was stone-faced going down that roller coaster. Then his kid's scaring him. His kid turns off the lights and then jumps out and scares him, and he yells. And then there's a video of him where it says, like, Alex Pereira goes Christmas shopping, and then he's trying on clothes, and then he's shadow boxing in those clothes. I'm told this guy has no personality, but yet he's really fun. And I'm told that this guy is not a star, and someone who acts like this guy isn't a star, but yet I'd rather watch this guy than anybody currently right now in the UFC. Conor McGregor, Sean O'Malley, all the guys I'm told that I have to like. I'd much rather watch Alex Pereira over them any day of the week. If I had the option to watch any of those guys fight, I would pick Alex Pereira. His fights are very exciting, and he's one of those old school stars that we were told no longer existed. A guy who just shows up, puts on great fights, and is his authentic self. He's not trying to be somebody he's not. He's not trying to be a character like so many other people. He just shows up and he does what he does. And it's working for him. He doesn't speak English. I know he knows English. I know he's learning English. I've heard him say English words, but at this point in time, he just doesn't speak English. And that's another thing that we were told all stars in this sport must have. Well, this is an American company, so the stars have to be able to speak English. But here this guy is a star, no doubt about it. And here he is. Here's this guy who doesn't speak English, but he's a star. We were told for many, many years, if you want to be a star in this business, you have to speak English. And I think it's almost better that he doesn't speak English because he's so much more menacing as someone who we don't really know what he's saying. Now, of course, we need to get him better translators because he had that one little mix-up, but he's doing a great job doing what he's doing. It's very interesting what this guy's been able to do in a short period of time, and it's very interesting that he's making us re-examine everything we thought about this sport, and it's not just inside the cage, it's outside the cage with this way that he's promoting himself, which I'm sure he has people behind the scenes who are crafting some of the things that he does. I'm sure he has a team working with him. I know he puts out all these t-shirts, so he definitely has somebody helping him, and I'm sure there are discussions in-house on what he should do and how it should be packaged or whatever. You know, that's just the entertainment biz in 2024. I'm sure he has people who are helping him out with some of this stuff, but you can't fake what this guy's doing. This is just who he is, and it's very entertaining, even though, like I've been saying, I've been told that somebody like this is not entertaining. Somebody like this is not what we should be watching. Somebody like this doesn't exist in 2024. And piggybacking off the entertainment side of things and the personality side of things, that walkout is the best walkout in all of MMA history. Now, of course, we can have a debate about this. We can talk about this. And, of course, I'm just going off the top of my head. I would really have to think about, okay, all the great walkouts throughout the history of this sport inside the UFC and outside the UFC. So I'd really have to think about it. But just off the top of my head, this is the best walkout in the history of MMA. That walkout music, awesome. His walkouts in Glory were great, but they're even better now in the UFC because in Glory, they wear boxing gloves because it's kickboxing, obviously. So he comes over to mixed martial arts, and when he does the pullback for the arrow, in Glory, because he's wearing kickboxing gloves, or boxing gloves, sorry, because he's wearing boxing gloves, you couldn't see really when he released the arrow. Now, because he's in MMA and he's fighting in the UFC, when he pulls back the arrow and he releases it and he does the yell, people can understand that better. It looks better and it's easier to understand even if you can't hear him yell when he does the yell, when he releases the arrow, because the fingerless gloves make it easier to show that, hey, I'm shooting this arrow. And then he does the combination at the end. He does that little walk. Joe Rogan had one of the best calls ever when he was talking about the walkout at UFC 300. He's like, oh, this guy has the best walkout in MMA, and he does it, and then he goes, and then right on cue, Joe Rogan, when he starts to do that walk, Joe Rogan goes, right here, when he does this, when he starts doing this, it was one of the greatest calls at UFC 300, and one of the greatest calls of all time is when Joe Rogan's talking about his walkout. I mean, this is a star. This guy's a star. We're talking about walkouts. We're talking about excitement. We're talking about all this stuff. We're not talking about that with the other guys. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of showmen in the UFC. Don't get me wrong, and I don't mean to insult anybody to prop up Alex Pereira, but I'm just saying, like, this guy is giving us everything we want. He's giving us action. He's giving us knockouts. He's giving us great entertainment. He's giving us all the stuff that we want from our stars. We want all this stuff, and he's giving it to us. But that walkout is the best walkout, and that walkout music, fantastic. So that's another reason why I'm such a big fan of this guy. Again, I'm told we're not supposed to like this guy. I'm told this guy doesn't have the personality that we're looking for, but here I am, very excited to see this guy's next fight. Here I am counting down the days till this guy's next fight, which I'm sure is going to be coming up soon. Nothing at the time of this recording, which is 2 p.m. on May 31st, 2024. Right now, nothing's been announced, but I'm sure a fight will be scheduled soon. But I'm counting down the days to his next fight. I'm really looking forward to see this guy again because of all the stuff he brings to the table. So that's another reason why I'm a big fan of this guy, is because of that walkout. It's just fantastic. Then he has that statue, that head, that's his logo now. That's awesome. He's always saying Chama. He's got his own little catchphrase. That's awesome. You know, people tell me this guy isn't a star. People tell me that this is not what stars look like or sound like or act like in 2024. People tell me it's these other guys, but this guy's the star. This guy is one of those old school stars from the old days, guys that we grew up loving and watching in this sport, who were just guys who, they just showed up. You know, he reminds me a lot of Wanderlei Silva, the way Wanderlei Silva became a star. You know, Wanderlei Silva, he has the rolling wrists, you know, where he did that thing when they were announcing him. You know, he has a very colorful nickname, the Axe Murderer. Alex Pereira has a very colorful nickname also, Poetan, Hands of Stone. So Poetan, that's a very interesting nickname and a good nickname. Probably the best nickname out there right now. He does that awesome walkout. He has great walkout music. Mirko Krokop also was similar to this. Krokop, that's a very colorful nickname. Pereira has a colorful nickname. That walkout music, Krokop, Wild Boys, Duran Duran. When you hear that, you know something exciting is going to happen. And Pereira, he has a great walkout song also, that music that he uses. Wanderlei Silva did the rolling wrists, you know, and we have Alex Pereira, he does the little bow and arrow thing, and then the yell, and then that combination at the end. He's one of those old school stars in the mold of those guys, the guys that we grew up watching, and were the guys who, especially if you're an older fan like I am, I started watching in 2003. So if you came around in this sport at that time and you were a kid, I was like 12 back then, watching this sport, you grew up and those were the guys who you watched in this sport and were a fan of. We were told those guys are gone, but here Alex Pereira is in that mold and he's following that formula and it's working for him. So I find that very interesting, and that's another reason why I'm a fan of this guy. Another reason why I'm such a big fan of Alex Pereira is because of the activity. This guy hasn't even been in the UFC for 3 years, but he's already fought 8 times. He's won 2 titles, and yes, he failed to defend the middleweight title, and he lost the rematch under MMA rules, even though it was the 4th fight overall, to Israel Adesanya, but he tried to defend the middleweight title. Then he went and changed weight classes, fought Jan Blachowicz, beat Blachowicz, and then he fought for the light heavyweight title. And then recently against Jamal Hill, he defended the title that he won against Yuri Prohaska. So he's been very active. I can't stand when we only see fighters fight 1 time a year or once every 18 months or something like that. I can't stand inactivity. I want to see these guys. I want to see the best guys in the world fighting, and I want to see them fight often. I don't like when guys are fighting 1 time a year. I like 2 to 3 fights a year. And this guy's been very active, so that's another reason why I'm a fan of him, is because not only is he a great fighter and he's putting on great fights and giving us great action and delivering and winning fights, but he's doing it often. And the last reason why I'm such a big fan of this guy, and I'm sure there's other reasons that I'm missing, because there's so many things to love about this guy that I'm sure once I'm done making this video and I upload it, I'm going to be kicking myself and say, oh, I should have said this and I should have said that. But I'm sure in the future I'll be making so many more videos on this guy that eventually I'll mention that stuff. But the last reason why I'm such a big fan of this guy is because he's given us so many great moments. Of course, all the walkouts have been great. Of course, the weigh-in this guy does is awesome, where he wears the war paint. And then the stuff that he's done in the cage, the knockouts that he's given us, especially this last one. When he fought against Jamal Hill at UFC 300, he gets kicked in the nuts. He tells Herb Dean, who's going to step in and say, hey, let's give you a timeout, let's let you recover. He tells him, no, let's keep fighting. And then 5 or 10 seconds later, Jamal Hill's knocked out. Like, just great moments. And the Israel Adesanya finish in the first fight, the first time these guys fought, fantastic. He was losing in kickboxing when they fought the second time. He was losing that fight, and then in the last round, he knocked him out. And then in this fight, he was losing, and then in the last round, he stopped him. This guy, he has that it factor. You know, we're always talking about that it factor. We're always talking about, oh, this guy has it. We don't know what it is, but he's got it. This guy has it, and then some. So those are the reasons why I'm such a big fan of this guy. And I know that you listening, I'm sure I've named one of the reasons why you're a fan of this guy, if you are a fan of him. I'm sure you can relate to why I'm a fan of this guy. I'm sure one of the reasons I mentioned is why you're a fan of him also. So you've heard me talk about why I'm such a big fan of Alex Pereira. Now it's your turn. Hit me up in the comments section below. Are you a fan of Alex Pereira? If so, why? What's your favorite Alex Pereira moment? What's your favorite Alex Pereira highlight? What's your favorite thing that he's done so far in the UFC? Just hit me up in the comment section below. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Mike_Radich. That's M-I-K-E, the little line, Radich, R-A-D-I-C-H. You can follow me at that same name, both on Twitter and Instagram. I refuse to call it X. I'm not calling Twitter X. I'm not doing it. It'll be Twitter forever for me, even though they've crossed over and now it's X. I'm keeping it Twitter forever. So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and then of course here on YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.